Now, I suspect that many of you, if not all of us, have heard this passage read at some point. It's a very popular passage. At least it's very popular in certain venues. Where have you heard it? Wedding. Of course, at a wedding. It actually gets used at non-religious weddings, at weddings that aren't Christian at all. And that's not really a surprise when you consider that the portion of the letter we heard today does not mention God. It does not mention Jesus. And if you read just these verses without the rest of the letter, it is easy to imagine that this is some sort of poetic ode to love. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and angels but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. And the greatest of these is love. Now, I have no problem using this at weddings. I do it frequently. But I always point out that Paul is here not speaking of romantic love. As I noted, there's another Greek word for that. And Paul is not engaging in lofty poetry. Like my father, Paul here is fussing at his children. And so the Corinthians are not going to ooh and ah over the love in this letter when they first hear it. They recognize themselves in this letter. They know what's going on here. They're the ones, after all, who bragged about speaking in the tongues of angels, who claimed to understand great mysteries and to do great feats of faith. They were arrogant and rude. The wealthier members who often supplied most of the food and wine for the Lord's Supper sometimes couldn't be bothered to wait around for the poor and unimportant members of the church to even get there. And Paul has just finished admonishing them for not honoring all the different members, the people of Christ's body, when he begins to speak here of love. All these gifts that you're so impressed with, all this knowledge that you claim to have, it's all meaningless if you don't have love. That is agape love. That agape love that is the sort of love seen in Jesus. This sort of love, the love made possible because God first loves us in Christ, is more than any spiritual gift, more than any theological knowledge. Theological doctrines, denominations, spiritual gifts, all of them will someday be gone. They will all pass away. But the love of God remains. And the Christ-like love that we can love one another with when we are filled with the Spirit will remain. I've told you before that I'm a bit of a political junkie. But I have to confess that I have grown very discouraged over the political climate in our land. The petty divisions and the polarization. The arrogance that is sure my group is right and your group is wrong. The joy and glee with which we relish the failings of the other side, the slip-ups and the failings of the other side. It seems to me not so unlike the church at Corinth, the divisions there, or maybe even like the silly bickering of two brothers. And sometimes I despair that we may never grow out of it. But every now and then, when the earthquake struck Haiti almost 3 weeks ago, we mostly forgot our differences. Oh, I know there are a couple of folks who are hopeless, but for the most part, it didn't matter if you were Republican or Democrat, if you were liberal or conservative. People picked up their cell phones and they texted donations. They wrote checks and they went online to give contributions. There wasn't a whole lot of political posturing. For most of us, the question was simply, how can we best help? And as the days went by and we began to hear stories about people still alive in the rubble, we checked the news outlets for updates to see what was happening with those people in the grocery store or that woman in the cathedral. We watched, we hoped, we prayed, and nobody much worried about whether the person trapped under the rubble was male or female, young or old, black or white, rich or poor, college educated or no schooling at all. For a moment, none of the things that we normally use to divide ourselves mattered. For a moment, we experienced a bit of that Christ-like love that we are meant to have for others. For a moment, we caught a glimpse of ourselves as we are truly meant to be. For a moment, we were all family, and we acted like family. For a moment. But the moment is fading. Soon the old divisions will seem more real, more powerful, more important. Yet Paul says that this love we experienced in that moment will never end. This love, he says, is greater than all those other things we find so valuable and important and alluring. All praise to the one whose love would endure a cross for our sakes and who empowers us to discover our truest self in loving others as Christ first loved us. Thanks be to God.